In 1545, Spanish conquistadors discovered a mountain in the Peruvian highlands that would reshape the entire world. Within a century, so much silver poured out of this single peak that it caused economic chaos on 4 continents simultaneously. Here's the paradox. The nation that controlled this unimaginable wealth ultimately destroyed itself with it, while a kingdom on the other side of the planet that received the silver became so dependent on it that when the flow stopped, its empire collapsed. This is the story of how silver built empires and triggered the first truly global financial crisis. The mountain was called Cerro Rico, the Rich Hill, and it rose above the town of Potosi in what is now Bolivia. The Spanish had conquered the Inca Empire just a decade earlier, hungry for gold. What they found instead was something far more valuable for building lasting power: silver in quantities that defied imagination. By Yilililing, Potosi had become one of the largest cities in the world, with a population rivaling London or Paris. Its mines produced roughly half of all the silver extracted anywhere on Earth during the 16th and 17th centuries. To understand what happened next, you need to understand why silver mattered so much in this particular moment of history. The world economy in the 1500s ran on silver. Gold was prestigious, but too rare for everyday commerce. Copper was common, but too bulky for major transactions. Silver occupied the perfect middle ground, and demand for it was exploding. Europe's economies were expanding. Trade networks were stretching across oceans. And most importantly, the Ming Dynasty in China had made a fateful decision that would determine the flow of global wealth for 2 centuries. They demanded that all taxes be paid in silver. China was the manufacturing powerhouse of the early modern world. They produced silk, porcelain, tea, and countless other goods that Europeans desperately wanted. But China wanted almost nothing from Europe in return. There was only one commodity that could unlock access to Chinese markets: silver. This created an enormous vacuum, pulling silver eastward across the planet. The Spanish found themselves sitting atop the world's largest supply of the one thing everyone needed. Now follow the money. Spanish galleons loaded with silver crossed the Atlantic to Seville. From there, the metal flowed throughout Europe, paying for Spain's endless wars in the Netherlands, its armies in Italy, its vast bureaucracy. But Spain was not a manufacturing economy. They imported almost everything they consumed, so Spanish silver immediately leaked outward to purchase English wool, French wine, Italian weapons, Dutch ships. From Europe, the silver continued eastward through Ottoman territories, through Persia, through India, finally reaching its ultimate destination in China. Simultaneously, another stream of silver flowed directly across the Pacific. Spanish galleons sailed from Acapulco to Manila, carrying silver to trade directly with Chinese merchants for silk and spices. This was the first truly global trade network, and silver was its blood. At its height, perhaps a third of all silver mined in Spanish America ended up in Chinese hands. Here is where the trouble begins. The Spanish crown was spending far faster than even Potosi could supply. King Philip II inherited an empire that stretched across Europe and the Americas, but he also inherited his father's debts and his father's wars. The silver should have made Spain unimaginably wealthy. Instead, it funded an endless series of military campaigns against Protestant rebels in the Netherlands, against Ottoman fleets in the Mediterranean, against English rivals on the seas. Philip borrowed relentlessly against future silver shipments. German and Italian bankers extended credit secured by the promise of American treasure. But wars cost more than expected. Silver shipments arrived later than promised, and interest payments compounded mercilessly. In 1557, Philip declared bankruptcy, defaulting on his debts and devastating his creditors. He would declare bankruptcy 3 more times during his reign. Think about what this meant. The richest empire on Earth, with access to history's largest silver deposits, kept going bankrupt. The problem was structural. Each new wave of silver caused prices to rise throughout Spain. Inflation meant Spanish goods became more expensive than foreign alternatives. Manufacturing withered, skilled workers emigrated. Spain became a pipeline through which silver flowed from America to the rest of the world, enriching nearly everyone except Spain itself. Meanwhile, in China, something equally dangerous was developing. The Ming dynasty had restructured their entire economy around silver. The single whip tax reforms consolidated various obligations into a single payment in silver. This meant peasants had to sell their crops for silver to pay taxes. Merchants needed silver for transactions, and the entire economy became dependent on continued silver imports. The turning point came in the early 1600s. Spanish silver production began declining as the richest veins at Xpze were exhausted. Simultaneously, European demand for silver increased as the 30 Years' War consumed the continent. Less silver flowed eastward to China precisely when the Ming dynasty needed it most. The results were catastrophic. Silver prices inside China rose dramatically. Peasants who had converted to cash crops for exports suddenly could not earn enough silver to pay their taxes. Farms failed. Tax revenues collapsed. The Ming government could not pay its armies, could not maintain its infrastructure, could not respond to a series of devastating famines. Rebellions erupted across the empire. In 1644, the Ming dynasty fell. Invading Manchu forces swept southward and established the Qing dynasty. Historians still debate the precise causes of the Ming collapse, but the silver crisis was undeniably central. The dynasty that had built its fiscal system around foreign silver was destroyed when that silver stopped arriving. Back in Spain, the consequences were equally severe but more prolonged. Throughout the 17th century, the empire slowly contracted. The Netherlands won independence. Portugal broke away. Military defeats accumulated. The Habsburgs, who had ruled the greatest empire since Rome, faded into second-rate power status. Their silver had enriched their enemies and impoverished themselves. But some nations profited enormously from this crisis. The Dutch Republic emerged as Europe's dominant commercial power. Dutch merchants had positioned themselves as intermediaries in the global trade network, and Dutch bankers had learned from Spanish defaults how to manage sovereign risk. Amsterdam became the world's financial center, pioneering new instruments like joint stock companies and tradable shares. England similarly benefited. English pirates and privateers intercepted Spanish silver fleets. English merchants captured trade routes. English manufacturers filled the void left by Spanish industrial decline. The foundations of British imperial power were laid during Spain's silver-fueled collapse. What does this centuries-old story reveal about today? Consider the parallels. China is again the world's manufacturing center, running massive trade surpluses. The United States is again the world's dominant military power, running massive deficits to fund global commitments. Today's reserve currency is the dollar rather than silver, but the dynamics rhyme. Nations that earn dollars through trade accumulate claims on American assets. America's ability to run deficits depends on continued foreign demand for dollars. And just as Spain discovered, controlling the world's money does not guarantee prosperity if that money simply flows outward to pay for imports and wars. The silver story also reveals how vulnerable complex systems become to disruption. The Ming dynasty seemed unshakably powerful until the single commodity their economy depended upon became scarce. Today's supply chains are vastly more intricate. A semiconductor shortage, an energy crisis, or a disruption to critical minerals could cascade through the global economy in ways that 16th century observers would find eerily familiar. Perhaps the deepest lesson concerns the nature of wealth itself. Spain possessed silver in quantities that seemed infinite. They mistook the possession of money for the creation of value. They consumed rather than produced. They borrowed against future treasure rather than building present capacity. When the silver ran out, nothing remained. The nations that truly prospered from the Silver Age were not those that mined it. But those that traded it manufactured goods to exchange for it and built institutions to manage its flow. Wealth, it turns out, is not a substance you extract from the ground. It is a capacity you build within your society. The mountain of silver at Potosi still stands, hollowed out and exhausted. The empires it built are dust. But the financial instruments invented to trade that silver, the banking practices developed to manage its risks, the global trade networks established to move it around the world, these persist and shape our lives today. The metal itself was merely the catalyst for something larger. A revolution in how humanity organizes money and power that continues to unfold for centuries later.